After I finished building the computer from my last video, I was browsing through used computer parts just for fun, and I came across a really great deal for a CPU, motherboard, RAM, and cooler bundle. The posting was just a few minutes old, but when I messaged the guy, he said that somebody had already bought it. At first I was going to do the sensible thing and move on with my life, but I'm a person who has very little shame, so instead I asked the guy if he would sell it to me instead if I paid him $10 extra and picked it up from him in person. He ended up agreeing, and so I successfully snatched this deal from the other would-be buyer. And after a 30-minute trip in a stinky bus, I had the goods. So I actually made a Reddit post about this purchase, and a bunch of people said it wasn't a good deal at all, which really made me question my life choices. I got this bundle for a grand total of 5,500 Ukrainian pesos, which would be about $135. The CPU I got is an i3-12100F, and yes, that is indeed a quad-core CPU, which was released in 2022. And actually, this is one of the fastest 4-core CPUs out there, which is going to be very cool to check out. Who knows, maybe having more than 4 cores in 2025 is overrated anyway. And next we've got 16 gigs of RAM, and these are 2 sticks of Goodram IRDM DDR4 at 3600 megahertz. And for this CPU cooler, we've got this Noctua NHL9 clone with a 90mm Noctua fan on top of it. I don't know the exact model of the heatsink itself, but I'm pretty sure it works more or less the same as the original Noctua heatsink. Alright, now what I think actually makes this purchase worth it is the motherboard, which is the Asus Prime H610L Plus Mini ITX. A few things I really like about this motherboard is that it has a nice VRM and VRM heatsink compared to other boards in the same category, which should be enough for our beastly 4-core CPU. And of course we have a Gen 4 PCI slot, which is very important for the graphics card that we're going to put in here. And maybe some of you can already guess what graphics card I ended up getting just by me saying that. Yep, that's right. It's the RX 6400 from Sapphire, which I paid $95 for. I made the mistake of posting about this purchase on Reddit as well, and received about 50 comments calling me stupid for buying this thing as well. So, according to Reddit, this build was basically doomed from the start. But I'm not going to let that stop me. For storage, we've got a 256GB NVMe from Patriot and a 520GB SATA SSD, also from Patriot. And actually this one is from the last build that I did, the Ryzen machine. I already had these lying around, but they're about $20 each if you buy them new. Okay, let's talk about the case. I actually ordered another one of these Terra cases that I used in the last video, and it's just because this is an amazing case. It was only $12, and it comes with this really nice 250 watt Bronze TFX power supply from FSP. I wanted to make things a little bit interesting this time, so I ordered some spray paint, and I went ahead and I painted the whole case. I started out by taking everything apart, then I sanded everything by hand, and after that I was ready to paint. I think the case has a real retro look to it, so I chose to paint it a light blue and give it a few chrome accents. Kind of like a vintage car or something like a vintage refrigerator. The spray paint ended up being a little bit darker than what I thought it would be, but I still think it turned out really nice. If you really get close to it, you can see some kind of minor imperfections where some of the dust got onto the paint while it was drying. And there's some parts where I didn't do enough sanding and some of these surfaces kind of look messed up. Also, this chrome button ended up being a real nightmare. I put on too many layers of paint, so it didn't cure properly, and when I pressed down on it, it would leave fingerprints. So I pretty much had to sand it all over again and start from the beginning.
Oh my fucking god, dude.
This whole thing ended up taking about 3 days to finish, and in the end, when everything comes together, it actually looks very nice, so I'm pleased with the result. And now that we have our case finished, we can put everything together. When I took off the CPU cooler, I saw that the thermal paste was basically brand new, and there was a whole bunch of it, so I just ended up scraping it around with a piece of plastic, and I put the cooler back on. And no, I'm not joking, I'm not about to go and throw out perfectly good thermal paste. And it also looks like the previous owner lost the original mounting hardware for this thing, so they 3D printed some of these plastic nuts. So I had to grab these nuts with a pair of pliers and twist them into place. I also didn't have the original I/O shield, so I ended up 3D printing a universal one, and I colored it blue. Now, honestly, I think this kind of setup would be a nightmare with a flex power supply because the fan is on the side. But with a TFX power supply, the graphics card sits right against the power supply fan, so you've got the power supply sucking out some of that hot air. That and the perforated side panel also helps the GPU stay relatively cool. Although, as we'll see later, the graphics card is still going to be on the verge of a nuclear meltdown when it's maxed out. I also saw that you can actually mount two 60mm fans in this case. The top slot wouldn't be possible to use, but I did put a fan into the front, which hopefully will help keep the graphics card a little bit cooler. For the storage, the NVMe just goes onto the front of the motherboard, which is convenient. And for the SSD, I ended up mounting it onto these holes that were originally used for mounting the CD-ROM in this case. I just put in 2 screws and it was secured. Alright, now we can get into some games and unleash the power of our mighty RX 6400 and 4-core CPU. And I'll begin by apologizing because all the testing I did was with a 900p monitor instead of a 1080p one. Like I said, I'm very sorry, and I've already made a small donation to a local charity for my transgressions. Anyway, the first game we've got is one of my favorite games, Elden Ring. And I've got it set to 720p and high settings, and we're having a very good time. The game is running at 60 FPS, which the game is locked to, and the frame time is very low. And you can run this at a higher resolution as well, but then you'll probably have to set the graphics to something lower just to get 60 FPS. Otherwise, you'll have about 50 or so. I've played through this game 3 times now, and each time the performance was much worse than this. The first time I beat it was actually with a Xeon E3 1220, which is a 4-core, 4-thread piece of trash, basically. Which was really awful, but that didn't stop me from having a good time. Next is Red Dead Redemption 2, which also runs great. Settings are high at 900p, so if you want to run around as Arthur Morgan and get TB from beating a man to death for a couple bucks, then this computer will be perfect for that. Some of you might have noticed that the graphics card is on the brink of catching fire, but somehow that seems to be very common, especially in such tiny cases, so I guess I'm just gonna have to deal with that. Next is Witcher 3 at 900p high settings, and this is once again the version before the next gen update, and you can run this older version pretty much on a potato. So if you haven't played Witcher 3 because you're on older hardware, then you should definitely try out the older version. And our last game for today is going to be Baldur's Gate 3, 900p medium settings, and admittedly this is the start of the game and it's not a very CPU intensive area, but I've played through the game, so I know that the CPU isn't going to struggle with the intensive parts. My girlfriend is going to be using this computer, and this is a game that she really loves, so I'm glad that it runs well. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, I wish the temperatures were a little bit better with this card, and I think if you're going to have long gaming sessions, then it might be a good idea to remove the side panel. Another thing I tried doing is I actually cranked the CPU cooler to the max just to get some additional airflow. So that's it for the games, and of course I'm very satisfied with how everything turned out, and I'm going to be making another video very soon. I ended up buying a ton of small form factor PC stuff, and a lot of it is basically really stupid stuff that's bordering on e-waste, but I still ended up getting it, and I'm going to be using it for some tiny builds, as well as designing and 3D printing some custom cases. So if you want to see some videos like that, be sure to subscribe. And that's it for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one.